Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Mastering AI, the Sales AI Toolbox for Maximum Impact. We're going to give folks just a few seconds to join in here for today's conversation. I'm super excited to be joined by an all-star panel talking about all things AI. So we are joined by Sneha Subramanian, Director of Data Science at Salesloft, Derek Steer, CEO and co-founder of Superframe, and Philip Eggleston, Solution Engineering Manager here at LeadIQ. As always, the webinar is going to be recorded and will be sent out following the webinar to your inboxes. I do want to direct your attention to the right side of the screen. You can find a chat as well as a QA for us. If you have questions during the course of the webinar, please drop them in there and we will jump in and start the conversation with you. As we wait for more people to join, we are going to pull up a poll for you to answer before we get started. Is your organization using AI tools in your sales process today? All right, I am seeing some results trickling in here and give folks another couple of seconds before we get started. But yeah, seeing lots of, looks like the overwhelming answer is going to be yes, but only in a limited capacity. For those that are answering extensively, please drop in the chat some of your favorite tools and solutions that you're using today. Would love to hear what is top of mind for our attendees. Awesome. Cool. So we are going to start today's session here. As we can see that overwhelmingly for organizations using AI tools, yes, only in limited capacity. So as we go and dive into the topic today, hopefully we will shed some light on some new tools and different techniques that you can take back to your organization to really impact the art of AI in sales. So for today's conversation, we're going to talk through a couple things. First, we're going to chat through the evolution of AI in sales, hear from our awesome panelists here. Then we're going to dive into some direct tools, tips, and workflows for you to explore. And then as we wrap up today's conversation, we're going to go into everyone's favorite of our hot takes. As we go into the conversation today, Sneha, I want to start with you. So as we were prepping for the call today, we talked around the three pillars of AI and sales. So one is at first how AI is informing the process of sales. Secondarily, that's evolved into the workflows. And then lastly, and I think what is the most important part is how does AI help us generate sales insight? So I would love to pull you onto stage and hear a little bit more about your thoughts from trends of the year, how the tools have really expanded since the advent or major public push of ChatGPT to the public.
Yeah, thanks, Jacob, and everyone. Really nice to meet you. I'm so happy to be here and super excited for the next 1 hour. So Jacob, obviously, when we think about the big AI tools that made a splash this year, I'm guessing everyone has their heads wrapped around ChatGPT right now. It created a lot of hype, some real, some a little too much. Realistically, being a very good brainstorming space for a lot of people. Maybe it's not something that works for everyone, but a lot of people got a very good brainstorming and iterating usefulness out of it. Something that people don't realize is it's not the only generative AI or large language model out there. Google has its own several capabilities. Gemini was announced very recently. Anthropic has clouds. There's just so many out there. And there are open source ones as well, like Llama and so on. And then when you go into more specialized tools, they exist as well. Some have existed for a while now, but of course, Salesloft has had Rhythm and Conductor AI that was released this year. We have Draft with AI, and Jacob and Philip, obviously, LeadIQ has Scribe and so many others. So bunch of tools, and I think the space is really exciting because we're seeing so much usage of AI over the last couple of months and years.
Definitely. Even just the conversations I'm having with teams and external SMEs, AI has slowly crept into the forefront of everyone's mind around usage. What's the latest tools and how do we even think about adapting AI? Phil, I'm going to turn it over to you. Phil is our internal advocate and champion for all things AI. And from what I know, he's been championing all the AI initiatives here at LeadIQ. So Phil, would love to hear what are some of the things that you've been building with AI to support LeadIQ?
For the question, Jacob, and welcome for that's watching. I'm certainly an evangelist around LeadIQ, and as soon as ChatGPT was launched, I recognized the power there, and it's only improved with their more recent releases like GPT-4. And with GPT-4 came some coding capabilities that I was able to tap into. So for me, I was never a developer or somebody that could code, but when I was able to start to write Python primarily with GPT-4, it opened up a world of possibilities for me to build tools for our team across different roles. So our AEs have their own tools that they can use, and my solutions team is using AI heavily in our support of, say, building business cases out and different ways of visualizing the data and looking for patterns in data that we could never do before without much more honed skill sets. And so for me, it's just been a way to do things that I could never do before, build things that I could never build before, and not be so reliant on other tools and other people having built things. So that's been the main use case for me, is using, whether it's the API, but I'm a user of OpenAI's API a lot.
Nice. No, I appreciate the perspective there. And then, Phil, as we were getting ready for the conversation today, one of the things that I think we circle a little bit around on, and I would love to get your perspective for the people watching today, is as folks are starting to upskill themselves and think about the AI use cases, what are some good kind of recommendations of thinking about how to get started, or even starting to shift the mindset of thinking about AI in my day-to-day life? How did you get started with that?
It's interesting because it comes up with my team too, is how do we really use this? It's sometimes like ideas and how to use it isn't so simple. I think it's going to sound a little bit ridiculous, but I would ask the AI that. Like, I would tell them who you are, I would tell them what you're trying to achieve, and I would ask it to brainstorm some ideas. And if you don't like them, give it some feedback and continue to iterate on that. It's like this incredible superpower that everybody has access to. Now you have access to the very best specialists in all categories, essentially, with AI now. So it's be curious and don't be afraid to ask questions and then try things, is what I would say.
Nice. No, I like that. Even with my own use cases of leveraging AI as a brainstorming partner, it's come a long way. Derek, I'm going to shift focus a little bit here and start talking about our next topic here as we think about the evolution of AI, right? We saw back in the early 2000s, there was really the advent of automation, and everyone in marketing and sales was super excited about that kind of tech revolution that was going on. And I've started to see, and as we were talking, started to see some parallels around the rise of automation to now the rise of AI, and would love to just hear your thoughts building your own AI company. Tell me just a little bit about how you've seen the space change and where you think AI is headed.
Yeah. So just to start off really quickly, what Superframe is working on, and we are still a very early stage startup, is I think a lot of the advances that we will see in AI were inspired by the launch of ChatGPT, the rise of chat as an interface. Superframe is one of these companies. So I think we'll see a lot of them get released over the next year, 2 years, and then we'll have this exact same conversation again, and it'll be much different. But the thing that we're working on is helping folks to configure their go-to-market tools, starting with Salesforce, which is very expensive and difficult and time-consuming to do, in part because it's a complex system, and everything you do, you need to research what's in the system before you actually make changes. The reason that it matters that we do this is because at the end of the day, why do companies have a CRM in the first place? It's so that you can track what you're doing and then be able to reference it later in other sales calls, and for management to be able to understand forecasting, to be able to help reps to hit their targets and so forth. You can't do that stuff without data. And I think the key parallel between automation and AI as we're seeing today is that they rely on having good data. The better data you have, the better you're going to be able to make use of these technologies. And so we see our purpose as help cement the right business processes into Salesforce, make them correct and do it quickly so that companies can have a good baseline of data, which they can then use for other AI tools or automation or whatever it may be.
Yeah.
The other sort of core difference here, like when I think about automation versus AI, I think maybe the best place to think about where these differences exist is in something like a customer support chatbot, where the previous generation of chatbots were like tree-based. It would ask you, hey, okay, here's a question. This happens like when you pick up the phone and you call customer support a lot of the time, like press 1 for this, press 2 for that. And you have to go through this tree before you get where you want. Now, one of the biggest things that AI has changed is you don't have to go through the tree anymore. You just tell it what you want and it navigates you all the way to the end of the tree. And so it's a very significant change in just the amount of time that it takes for you to get an answer based on the data that you already have.
Yeah, no, I think I even remember seeing from Dreamforce this year, Salesforce showcasing some of those capabilities of AI being able to digest not only what the human is inputting based on the conversation over the phone, but also what's happening within the Salesforce and on the account level. And so that really goes into the validity and truly needing clean data within your system. I did see a question come in here from Brent, and so would love to get y'all's opinion. Any thoughts on how best to use the persona prompt to practice customer interactions using LLMs? I don't know if you want to take a first stab, and then we can shift the conversation from there.
I think what's meant here is positioning the chat or the conversation and creating a persona for the rest of the conversation. The best use of this would be to probably do some research, or actually, I'm going to change my mind. Go to ChatGPT-4, ask it to research for you, ask it the best persona prompts, the best way to create a persona prompt, and then try to fit that in, because it knows. I would ask it, how do I create a persona prompt for interacting with GPTs? And it will give you the structure of that, and then you can take that. Or you could go on LinkedIn and troll it and look for a persona prompt that somebody's already created. But you have access to the very best specialists in all categories pretty much with GPTs. I've had the most success when I ask GPT-4 how to structure prompts for GPT.
Nice. Asking the model itself on how best to give it the prompt. I like that piece of insight there. Sneha, Derek, I don't know if you have any additional thoughts to share towards the question there.
I just put this in the chat. What Philip just described is actually reverse prompt engineering, right? Like you're asking the GPT model to create a prompt that you'll again then use back in there. And that's a very successful technique. So that's a really good call. The other thing I would say is at the end of the day, ChatGPT and other large language models, they have an enormous space within which they're looking for information to answer your questions. It's always good to help it help you, right? Help it to tone down the space. When you're prompting it, I think something that we like to do is role play with it. Give it a role. Tell it that you are, I don't know, a salesperson selling into manufacturing. I don't know, just give it some role, right? And so that it's essentially focusing on a specific area of its data and is able to answer from there. So that's another tip that I would give.
Nice. I definitely like giving it these personas and roles to see just how wildly some of the responses can change based on the prompting you've given it. So let's talk about how AI is really redefining sales and start getting into the meat of the conversation today. So I think the first thing that we really wanted to explore, and Derek, I'll look back to you to chat with me about this, is tools being built post-Chat GPT versus integrating AI into existing products. I would love to get your perspective, not only of why is now the time to build an AI-based product, but secondarily, like Where are we going from here? What does that potential next wave look like?
The right time to build an AI-based product probably was actually a couple of years ago. If you think about the stuff that we know of became available to us or became like publicly known with ChatGPT, but like Jasper was doing effectively ChatGPT, and I think was started 2 years before the release of ChatGPT. So this stuff has been around, and if you think like Gong has been marketing AI summarization of conversations and that kind of thing for a while. So like the stuff has existed in this world. I think what is really different is chat as a user interface, quality of chat as shown through ChatGPT, right? It is chat that was the killer application for this current generation of technology. And so you're seeing lots of stuff. Y Combinator's current batches, like basically all companies that are doing some kind of chatbot. And I think we're going to see a couple things. The first one is a lot of these hallucinate. I think a lot of us know the hype cycle where you have the sort of peak, and hopefully I'm doing this in the right direction for the camera, but you have the peak, and then after that is the trough of disillusionment. I think what we're going to see is probably 6 more months of cool stuff coming out, right? Which is every company that already exists racing to get AI features into their products, and then a deluge of folks from Y Combinator and wherever else making publicly available products that are using the OpenAI's APIs and that kind of thing. And I think what's going to happen is the ones that will succeed are ones where accuracy is not absolutely paramount. So today, what you have is like good research tools, but that sometimes give you the wrong info, and you have good first draft generators, right? If you want to interact, role play, that kind of thing, what's good about those use cases is that you're not going to copy and paste the output and send it directly to the customer. I would never advocate for that because these models do hallucinate. They're good for the back and forth with you, and then you refine what they say before you send it along to a customer. Hopefully folks on this call are doing that anyway with anything that they receive. They're verifying stuff before you send it to a customer, but that's the way that these things should be treated for now. And I think that all of the things that companies that purport to give some sort of source of truth based on AI are not going to do well. And then people are going to get tired of levels of accuracy pretty soon. So I think that the next wave after this will be focused on verification, right? There are lots of different angles from which people talk about trust in AI. It is very clearly the biggest problem. If you were to go to Hacker News today, the top article on Hacker News right now is titled "The AI Trust Crisis," and there's tons of conversation about it. It's about Dropbox just not disclosing that they're sending data over to OpenAI and like auto turning the feature on for everybody. That is one flavor of trust that is concerning to folks. But I think that the thing that will shape ultimately how we use these tools is whether you trust the output of them when you actually use them. And that we're going to see the next generation of that, I don't know, maybe a year from now. But we're going to have to check and verify all the stuff that comes out for the next 6 months or the foreseeable future. And that to me is, I think, my biggest takeaway for if you're using these tools. Make sure you're verifying the output and then tailoring it.
Absolutely. And yeah, I will echo that in my own AI journey, that as they've been rolling enhancements to ChatGPT, I fell in love with Perplexity.ai early on because it had the ability to cite itself and help you validate, yeah, it's not just hallucinating information, because I had asked an early iteration of Bard at one point in time to tell me about the executive team at an organization, pulled out all these great candidate profiles, but none of these humans existed. And so Bard has since made many improvements, but Derek, that touches exactly on what you're talking about. These tools can hallucinate and make up stuff along the way. We've got another question in the chat from Adam here that I think will definitely warrant some deeper conversation. So how is LeadIQ or other sales tools taking the philosophical approach to sales? How to approach and connect with people versus just writing personalized messages at scale? Additionally, Adam goes on to say it feels like there's a gap between current features and functionality where personalized feels kind of like a shotgun or spaghetti on the wall approach to see what sticks. And then I think lastly, as we think through a 3-tiered approaches, how does this fit into the various sales methodologies like MedPick, Challenger, Gap, or solution selling? Between Phil and myself to talk through the LeadIQ perspective, but Sneha, I'm not sure if you have any thoughts from the Salesloft side of the conversation here.
I think it's a really good question. I think it's a very good thought around what about personalization versus using science, right? And I think that's where we say, hey, sales is a combination of art and science. And science to me is where we have verified through the data, here's what works, here's what ties best to the outcomes and so on. And art is the little bit of personalization that we do on top of it when we're like making it truly customized for a specific prospect or buyer or what have you. Needs to be a combination. So I do agree with that perspective. And that's where, and to me, like when I'm thinking about that, I'm thinking about from a Salesloft perspective, the play between cadences and writing personalized emails, right? Doing them both hand in hand is important.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll echo that as I've been getting deeper with the team here at LeadIQ. That's one of the areas that I'm focusing in on with the scribe generated content is how can we layer in some of the intent signals that we're seeing across the web, plus the Salesforce data, plus the scribe AI capabilities to start generating messages that kind of go beyond the quote unquote personalized, as Adam put it, approach, because I think we're all starting to see that a lot of the content generated by AI, you can start to tell where I remember early on in the days it all felt new and fresh, but there's definitely a structure and kind of cadence that you start to see within that. Phil, I'm not sure if you have any kind of additional thoughts here from your perspective since you've been involved with some of the AI initiatives with LeadIQ a little bit more.
Yeah, so this is an interesting question. We at LeadIQ, we definitely follow the MEDPIC sales methodology pretty closely. From a scribe solution perspective, we're definitely taking a data-driven approach. We're looking at what's performing well from, usually that's going to be around outcomes like reply rates and openings, and trying to leverage those more often and push those insights to the users. I don't know if that answers the philosophical approach, but that's what we're doing. So it's a combination kind of what Sneha had said. And then when it comes to looking at sales methodologies and analyzing how we're doing, that's something that we built internally, actually. So one of the first things that I built was the ability to look at calls and transcripts and then offer coaching and different functions that are going to help your sellers understand the sentiments. There may be the buyer's perspective, maybe the emotion of the call, things that don't seem like they would come out during a transcript, but the GPT-4 is doing a pretty good job with it. And of course, checking the boxes on MEDPIC and helping them have better conversations and better follow-up is part of that. So our team has access to that. They don't all use it. About half of them are using it regularly, but that's been my approach anyway, and my take on how to support this from the sales perspective.
Nice, thanks, Phil. So I'm going to go a little bit out of order as we go into some of our tools, tips, and workflows. So Derek, one of the things we've been circling around here, especially dancing around Adam's question, is talking about data and knowing like you're building an AI product for Salesforce. Talk to me a little bit about Superframe's perspective on this and some of the vision here around data and AI.
Sure. I actually want to first address the previous question because I think there's some other stuff that can be valuable here. Personalization can mean that tools are automatically personalizing for you, but you also can personalize things yourself with other information that's retrieved using AI. ChatGPT is not connected to the internet live, but Bard is, and you can use that to go do, in fact, just before this call, I tested it and asked it to summarize the latest SEC filings from Microsoft. If you're selling to Microsoft, you're going to want to do that before you go and talk to somebody, or pick whatever company it is that you care about. You know, you can do more than just take what there is obviously in the tools. You can go get information yourself and use AI to bolster your own understanding of your customers, not just help spray and pray stuff.
Yeah, nice.
So Superframe, our philosophy here really is one I guess I would say our sort of general take on this is AI is really good at taking large corpuses of information that would be impossible to wrap your head around as a human being, and then picking out the parts that are important. And so that's what we're doing primarily today, is we're saying like, hey, the biggest impediment to quick changes in Salesforce or pick your other go-to-market tool really is understanding what you will break, right? Like I have this field for like why we lost a deal. One of the values is competitor, and I want to turn that one value into the names of our top 3 competitors. That's probably going to break some reporting. It might break some automation tied to that. If that gets used to kick off marketing automation later, then we're going to have to fix that. And every single change that goes into these systems has to run through this process of what else exists, what other automation, like how have we tied the rest of our process to this particular thing? And it just happens that we can feed all that information into the machines and they can have a better view of it than a human could. Big thing here, and I think this will come up later again in this conversation, is what are the jobs that people are going to do and what are the jobs that the AI is going to do? And I'm reminded of this like great Steve Jobs interview from the 80s where someone asked him about personal computers and said, isn't this going to take away lots of jobs? Which, like, sitting here in 2023, we now know that was not the case, and in fact that it created way more jobs. I think we're going to see the same thing happen here, where once you have the ability to do some of these things faster, the value of a person is fundamentally going to change. And I think this gets at the premise of the question that we just discussed, which is personalization, right? AI is personalizing, doesn't really feel personalized in the same kind of way. And I think the goal here is for people to spend time talking with customers. And it always has been the goal, is spend as much time as possible working with customers to map your solution to whatever their problems are. And I think that's the undertone of this whole thing for me, is whatever we're doing, it needs to ultimately enable that, right? Even if it is doing it through some other things. So we're creating better data so that you can have better prospecting that is faster to get through so that you can get on the phone with a customer more quickly. And that's the guiding light for us, and I think should be for every AI tool in the sales and marketing worlds.
Nice. Yeah, I completely agree with the perspective here. And I think to your point, that kind of tees up to talk about Salesloft Rhythm. We were at the Salesloft conference, was very excited to see Rhythm rolled out to the larger universe. So Sneha, to that point, tell us a little bit about Salesloft Rhythm and some of the enhancements, the features, and where you think AI is going within the Salesloft platform.
Yeah, and I want to start with giving some background and the why behind Rhythm. Going back to what Derek just said about, it's all about like how can we help people do better jobs or be more create more value, right? And Jacob, in the beginning, you pointed out it's all about process, workflow, insights. If you think about your best sales rep or your highest performing sales team, they're probably the one they have the best, most consistent process. They're executing the most optimal workflow. They're leveraging data and insights most effectively, and so on. And so from Salesloft's perspective, where we come in is workflow. We're a workflow platform, and where we play a role is building the most optimal workflow. And that's where Rhythm comes into play, right? So Rhythm, as you said, Jacob, we released this a little bit earlier this year. And essentially the idea is it's optimizing the sales workflow for better outcomes so that every rep can do more effective work and be more successful. The way it works is there's also a signals component to Rhythm that I want to mention. So signals like obviously LeadIQ signals also like filter into Rhythm and like get surfaced there. And the way it works is really like we're trying to help reps book more revenue, to create more opportunities, and so on. Essentially focusing on the most important parts of their leads and their deals to ensure that they get the most out of what's in their pipeline or what's in their opportunities.
Signals piece is candidly one of the things that we at LeadIQ are most excited about, because we leverage LeadIQ, like the data arm, tracking the job changes, feeding that into the Rhythm platform, and really helping sellers figure out what is that next best action without having to take up too much of the brain capital to figure out where they go
Yeah.
from here.
I also think Rhythm is really great because Salesloft has a very, just like what Derek said about personal computer created more jobs and didn't, it was a different thing. It changed the way we work. We have a very clear perspective that sales is a very human. You take the humanity completely out of it, and it's basically marketing in that case, right? Like you're doing it at scale. But it's a very human profession. I know personally, I want to be sold to buy a human and not a computer. So the way Salesloft approaches AI and AI development is that we want the human to be in the driver's seat. We want the AI to help with the workflow, to guide, to be the co-pilot, but not the pilot, right? And so that's the way we've been approaching this.
Nice. Nice. No, I like that perspective of, I remember seeing just all over LinkedIn, humans want to buy from humans, right? That's the challenge we always hear for B2B organizations. We need to follow after our B2C counterparts and think from a more human perspective. And then to bring it back to the topic at hand, how can we leverage AI as a mechanism to expedite that human to human process? We did get a question in from Dom here. What are some sales specific AI tools to help with prospecting, research, and personalization? And so, Phil, I know we have our LeadIQ Scribe section coming up here. You want to talk a little bit about, from your perspective, on this approach here, both with LeadIQ and additional sources?
Yeah, absolutely. So Dom, that's a great question. And it's probably the most common use case right now that we see in sales is personalizing and doing research and trying to expedite that multi-step process into usually going to be one pane of glass. And so we have Scribe. It's been out for a while now, and it's meant to do just that. And it's meant to help you stay on message and have some automated research happening as you're loading up a prospect. It's going to do a lot of the research that you would usually have to do depending on how you're going to market, things like doing research on their financials or podcasts that they've appeared on. These sorts of things usually take 10 minutes, 20 minutes, 30 minutes for somebody to do, and a lot of effort. Then they have to try to consolidate that and figure out how to put it into messaging with a value proposition that's going to resonate with that persona. And that just takes a lot of time. And so I can tell you right now that there are other solutions out there that are doing this. I think that Salesloft has a solution. I think pretty much everybody is starting to create this. But when you are looking at this, it's going to be about a high volume, a certain level of volume that you're trying to achieve with this sort of automation and AI generation, and making sure that you're in a process that's going to be scalable and actually adopted is probably the most important thing. And if you can sit right in their workflow where they work, it's much more likely that it's going to be used and leveraged. And then to everybody's point that they've already been making, inaccuracies with AI generation is going to be key. So no matter what you're using, it's always going to take a couple of minutes to do your own final touches on anything that's generated with AI. Make sure that it passes the sniff test, and then add in additional points. So you may have other sorts of collateral around the 3 points that you impact in this specific industry that may be something that you can just start to add into generations. So you can get a lot of the way there. You're getting the first draft down really quickly and then spending a little bit more time to really fine tune it and make it really good before you send it. But combining those drafting and in the research into one step, that's what Scribe is doing.
Nice. Thanks for that, Phil. And then Derek, what are your thoughts on this question?
I'm going to punt on specific tools, and in part because, yeah, you Scribe. And I just see what products are being incorporated or what AI products are being incorporated into the things that you already use today, because chances are there's something, given how hot it is right now. What I'll say instead, sorry for hijacking, but what I'll say instead is, in my previous business, we sold analytics software. And the most memorable cold outbound email that anyone on the team sent was to the Philadelphia 76ers, and the subject line was, "Trust the analytics process." And if you're not a sports fan, trust the process was like a mantra for the 76ers as they rebuilt their team. It was very specific to them. And so it was a really good attention getter. And I think that's the level that we should be striving for here, where if you're using AI to do research, what Phil said about going, like getting information from podcasts, right? Like how can we more quickly understand the prospect's perspective on the world and the things that they care about, and then deliver them something that shows, whether you really spend a lot of time or not, at least shows that you spent some time getting to know them personally, and you have thoughts about how their specific organization is going to be able to use what you do. That is, it helps bridge to the point where humans can do the thing that they want to do, right? It's flashing you some sense of, okay, there is a human here, right? In this world where AI is taking over everything, this one is so personalized or so good, someone must have thought about this. I'm going to go talk to the people who are thinking about me rather than XYZ competitor.
Nice. Yeah, no, and I've seen the chat kind of blow up here where some of our Sixers fans, if they saw that subject line, would immediately open it here. And I agree, like that is the standard in which we should strive. Leading up the ABM function at the past couple of organizations, that's how I talk with my outbound sales teams about is how can we use the data sets from, be it AI sourced, be it sourced from your own independent research, how can we cut through the noise of everyone else just using these spray and pray methodologies to provide something valuable, personable, and hopefully puts a smile on our prospect's face. Before we move on from this question, I did want to turn it over to you, Sneha, to see if you had any additional insights. Otherwise, we can continue the conversation.
I wanted to go back to what you were just saying, like how can we do better? I think it's a great time to be alive, right? There's so many AI tools out there, and it's blowing our minds and that. There is this problem of, as you said, which ones, how are we going to be able to bring the most value and have the best impact? And I do think that to some degree, we will see a little bit of proliferation of a little bit of excess where people are releasing a bunch of things here and there, which is great. Many are experimenting. But at the end of the day, what's going to be successful is, at least in the sales space, right? Like when we're talking about releasing tools that sellers can use, what's going to be successful are tools that will actually drive outcomes for sellers, right? Derek, what y'all are building, if it's going to drive the outcome of a better sales process, which eventually will give them better data and that would help them make better decisions, then that's a win, right? If LeadIQ Scribe is going to help them write better emails, that's a win. And same thing with Rhythm, right? At the end of the day, Rhythm exists for optimizing your workflow. If it gives you that better outcomes, then that's the win over there.
Nice. No, I really appreciate that perspective here. And we did have another question come in here from Shamit. We've talked a little bit about kind of the philosophical implications around AI. We've talked a little bit about researching and personalization, but this kind of goes on to the account planning side. What are some of those questions we can prompt AI tools with to build out an account plan? And it looks like the particular focus is for BDRs that they can then leverage in their prospecting. Yeah, I can jump in first here and say this is some of the pieces that I've helped ABM teams build out in the past. And first and foremost, you want to start thinking about is what's most important for your BDRs? What are those kind of core pieces of information that you know you need? And so how I went through this discovery process is I sat down with my SDR team and talked about, okay, you have a high tier account. Like, where do you start? And really starting to explore from them. And so they talked about recent executive hires. They looked at 10Ks if it was a large public company, really starting to look at some of those firmographic, technographic data points that are happening in the web in real time, and then starting to prompt the tool to source those back to you, provide summaries. I think we're in this interesting time frame with AI tools where some of them are really good at sourcing data, but it's not consistent. So I have found summarizing prompting tools to, I'm going to give you what I think is the best version of the data. Now generate insights based on that has been really powerful for me as I'm building it out. From there, I think we've talked a little bit about what are latest awards, podcasts, funding announcements, job changes are all valuable questions to prompt your, chat GPT or other AI tool for that process. Phil, I know this is something you have a personal interest in as well. And so I'd turn it over to you. Talk a little bit about your kind of account planning and engineering solution you've built for LeadIQ.
Yeah, so I did build out a GPT for this, an account researcher for the sales team to use, but I find that it times out quite a bit. So when you're using it, it's just timing out when it's asking the internet a bunch of things. And so I'm going to say what I've been railing on this whole time is whenever you have these questions, there was a website and I think it was Let Me Google That For You. It was like LG that, and it was .com, and it basically redirected you to Google. This is, if you have Chat GPT, I would highly encourage everyone to pay the additional $20 for GPT Plus. It can browse the web. It can generate images for you. It can do it can do data analysis, which is one of the key components that our team uses it for. But it'll also answer this type of a question extremely well. So it's not always going to be perfect. I just spit out a bunch of information for you in the chat. This is just the first response that it had. I can continue to refine this. Please, if you haven't yet, jump on the bandwagon, start to ask it questions that you would ask anybody else to solve the problems that you're running into, and it's going to give you really good responses. Sometimes they won't be perfect, but you'll get in the right direction. You can start to refine the questions and tell it, no, that's completely wrong. This is not my business. This isn't, my industry works like this, and it's going to refine it and take that into account. So just going to point you back towards our future overlords.
Thanks for that, Phil. I'm curious for any of our other speakers, either Derek or Sneha, any other thoughts about just really solid prompting that you can make for what's worked well for SDRs or BDR teams in the past?
I'm gonna probably just not a tip, but more about something to watch out for. So obviously, many of us have heard hypes around, oh, this thing is going to take over the world and become our overlord or whatever. But the real danger, I think, is that a lot of people think it is sentient and it is making informed opinions and so on. The good rule of thumb is, for me, is that are we giving it enough context to make an informed opinion about something that you're asking, right? So if you just ask it things like, hey, can you give me the best 15-step outbound cadence? It's going to give you a cadence. Is it the best one? And same thing around, write me a really good outbound email. Tell me which top 3 manufacturing companies I should reach out to. Like just those simple questions that you're hoping it's giving you an informed opinion. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. In some cases, it is able to compute some stuff on the back end. Some cases, it's just saying things, right? And so that's something just to be careful about. I love what Philip said about keep interacting with it and iterating, right? And that's going to help you get to the right place.
Nice. No, I appreciate that perspective here. Derek, what about you? You have some thoughts here around prompting?
Yeah, my most general thought on prompting is it's an iterative process, basically, no matter what. Don't go into it thinking like, I will craft the perfect prompt. Just word vomit some prompt and then see what it says and then refine based on that. That's definitely the way to get the best results. Experimentation is part of the process here. The other thing I would say is think about where you allocate your time in general, right? Like the question of what prompts should I use is really not a prompting question. It's actually a research question, right? What are the things that I care about with respect to this particular customer? Is it their industry? Is something like newsworthy happening with or around them at the moment, or one of their competitors for that matter? How are they being impacted by AI? Like the use of AI is, it's such a hot topic right now that it's not just about whether AI can help you in your particular role, but it's like, how are other companies responding to the post AI world, and what are the business concerns for them related to that? These are the sorts of things that I would be thinking about. And if I'm an SDR, the way that I allocate my time would be much more heavy on, hey, what should I even be asking about customers right now? And then a little bit lighter on, okay, what prompt am I going to get that's going to give me all the right information? Because if you have the right questions to ask, getting the answers is going to be relatively straightforward, and you're going to be able to work your way to a prompt that does that for you.
Yeah. And I think that goes back to your first point, right? This is all an iterative process using your various language models as a brainstorming partner. And we've talked about it a couple of times, just turning around and asking the model itself, what further information do you need? Or based on other conversations, what are some additional questions we should be thinking about? Dom, I did see your comment in the chat around GPT at the contact level. I'll just put in a plug for a new tool I was turned onto from a friend. It's called Humantic, which will do some AI-based summaries on LinkedIn. Still exploring it on my side as well, but was impressed with some early results there. So definitely check that out. I'll put the name in the chat for you. Awesome. So we are closing in on the top of the hour and want to move to everyone's favorite section from our webinars, which we call our hot takes. So because AI, normally this is set up in a simple kind of yes/no format, but because AI is very much existing in the gray area, I'm going to give us a little bit more leeway to answer the questions here. So I'm going to ask the group here a question. You can give me a yes, no, and then limit your kind of response to no more than 2 sentences here for this. Starting out, Derek, we'll turn to you for our first hot take. Will AI replace SDRs?
Okay, this is dangerous because I could spend half an hour on just this thing, but my overall feeling about AI replacing SDRs, I think what we need to think about here first and foremost is, what's the job of an SDR anyway? And there are 2 main things that stand out to me. The first one is taking lower skilled work off of the AE's plates and doing it cheaper, right? That's basically how organizations view the SDR role is, okay, we don't want our sellers doing all of this stuff. They're very good at the later stages of the process. We're going to have SDRs do the first version. The second one is to provide a training ground for future AEs. And we're definitely going to need number 2. And we're probably still going to want number 1. It's just that what are the jobs that someone else can take off the AE's plate might change. So that's how I view this generally. I think the role will adapt. But my nuanced piece here is, I think it's going to look very different on an industry by industry basis. So there are some types of products or companies where, instead of having SDRs do a lot of one-to-one outreach, there's going to be stronger community efforts, as an example, where that's going to feel much more human. And then SDRs will do something that isn't necessarily about prospecting or lead generation in the same kind of way. They'll do something that is a little bit further down the funnel. There will be other businesses where, especially the less digital native businesses, where I think SDRs are always going to be a thing. And I had a long conversation with my colleagues about this the other day, and they made a lot of good points about selling things that feel more commoditized, like selling screws or light switches or something like that. There's always going to be an entry-level sales role there. And it's just going to be a matter of like, how are we using AI to help improve performance?
Yeah, absolutely. Sneha, your turn for the hot seat. AI replacing SDRs. What? Yes or no?
I have to admit, I'm terrible at hot takes. My takes are at best lukewarm. I don't think so. And I think it's like a hard thing to define, right? 10,000 years ago, there were no SDRs, and 10,000 years from now, there will be no SDRs. But 10,000 years ago, there was sales. And 10,000 years from now, if humanity is alive, there has to be sales, right? And so what's going to change? I agree with Derek. What's going to change is the definition of the role. Maybe we'll have different, maybe the title would go away, but we will have this a space for, like Derek said, junior folks to come in, learn the profession of sales, contribute in different ways, and then become eventually more senior sellers. That's always going to have to be there if sales needs to be around, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And then Phil, we were talking about this morning. So AI and SDRs, what are your thoughts?
I think the hot take is yes, they will be replaced. That time horizon, I'm not sure what it is. By the way, AEs also will be replaced. So will SEs. Knowledge workers are on the chopping block right now with AI, this industrial revolution, this fourth revolution. Before it was more manual labor tasks. Now it's knowledge workers. And if you have seen any of the demos that are out there with some of the future AI products that can have conversations, that can serve as a customer support person, I built a chatbot that can act as an SE and talked about LeadIQ's product knowledge very well. Anybody can chat with it. It's only a matter of time before this role is nothing like what it is. Maybe, I don't think sales is, because if you look at the polls right now, people don't want to interact with salespeople until the very, very end, 86% of the way down their buying journey. That's when they want to finally talk to somebody. But if they can talk to somebody that has way more information than your average AE or SE or product expert, they're probably just going to chat with that person, especially when they can't tell. Once it's past the Turing test and they can't even tell it's an AI, then I think we're all on the chopping block and we're going to have to find different ways of occupying our time. That's my hot
I'm sorry, I
take.
have to respond. I have to respond to this. So,
Of course.
so I was once worked closely with a sales leader. I worked closely a decade ago with a sales leader who now is the CEO of Salesloft. So I imagine some of his understanding is baked into this. And he taught me something really important, which is that the competitor that puts the most effort or the sort of level of effort into a sale is going to be the winner. And I mean that specifically, what he was talking about at the time, because AI was not part of the conversation, really was about inside sales versus field sales. So if you have an inside salesperson who's calling, you are no match for someone who is in the hallways. And I think you can apply that to almost anything, right? If one company is willing to put forth more personal effort, they are going to get better information. Like sales is an information game in a lot of the time, right? They're going to have a better understanding of that org, the buying process, all of the information that is necessary. And so, okay, in a world where AI can do all of these jobs very well, it can still be beaten by people who are there. And that is the challenge, I think, that I would issue you for. Is AI going to take over everyone's jobs? Like maybe it could, but it will lose to a human being simply because people like talking to human beings. And if they can identify that there's not a human being on the other end of the conversation, they will drop it and talk to the company that's got the human being there. So I don't think we're going quite that far, maybe ever.
Awesome. I think we've got time for one more hot take here because I know these conversations are long and intricate. So AI, it's not safe for companies to use. Agree or disagree? Sneha, since you're the director of data science at Salesloft, I will turn it over to you because I know we've been getting some questions on the LeadIQ side around our AI products as well.
Yeah, and we've had a ton of questions this year. I think since ChatGPT happened, there's been like a lot of obviously interest around AI, but I think it's also been a lot of interest from security and legal teams across the board, trying to understand what is this new tool and is it going to be dangerous and all of that. And I understand that position a lot as well. So yeah, so I think it depends. I feel like the space that we're in right now, we're not in. I think if you were using AI in healthcare or something, you would have different risks that you would have to handle and mitigate versus AI and sales. It's not healthcare cannot use AI at all. It's just that they need to be mitigated, right? And same with AI and sales. It's not that there are no risks at all. They just need to be mitigated, and there are fewer. So yes, I think I think it's safe for companies to use as long as they figure out mitigate, as long as they are able to define risk levels that AI can pose to their business and to their customers, especially, and as long as they define exactly the mitigation efforts that they'll put into it.
Nice. Phil, over to you.
Sorry, I just dropped something in the chat to reference on this, which is the piece that I mentioned earlier that's on the top of Hacker News today about trust, that essentially likens, like one of the problems people have with OpenAI, for example, is we think it's training based on the data that we submit to it, which they will tell you they are not. This was a problem people have with Dropbox, and it's common. And this person likened it to a while ago when people thought that like Facebook was serving up ads. It was like listening to you on your phone's microphone and then serving up ads based on what it heard, which Facebook like vehemently denied. And there are a lot of reasons why Facebook probably was not doing that, in addition to their own denial of it. Just read this thing, and hopefully it will help shed light on like why people think that this particular thing is a problem. But my overall take is, yeah, AI is generally safe and trustworthy to use in the way that people are using it right now, whether it's ChatGPT or Bard, and the way that you be just prompting it directly.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing those resources. And then Phil, for you.
Last minute, yeah. I also shared a resource that goes through the top list of risks, and one of those is the top one is inaccuracy right now. Okay, I will drop one insight that I got from a friend of mine that works at Microsoft that I hadn't considered, and maybe some of you haven't considered it also. Probably the biggest risk that I can see, there's a bunch of them, but over provisioning. So we all use a bunch of tools and resources that we have permissions in, and we don't necessarily know how to get at data, or there may not even be a mechanism to get to data. And with AI and being able to chat with it and query and get data that we don't necessarily aren't capable of getting, we're going to have access to data that we probably shouldn't have access to, and now we can actually get it out. So I think over provisioning is probably one of the biggest risks that most organizations are sitting at right now, and probably we're going to have to handle in the near future as they roll out more AI tools to their team, and the team can start asking things that they probably shouldn't know.
Awesome. No, that was a great round of hot takes, and I see some folks in the chat agree. So since we are here at the top of the hour, Sneha, Derek, Phil, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me today. And to our people still watching, hopefully this has been an insightful conversation for you. Please be on the lookout for a recording and recap post tomorrow. I definitely want to direct your attention to Superframe. Sign up for early access, which will be included in the follow-up. And then Salesloft, they have provided us their latest State of AI in Sales report for you to be able to sign up and download as well. So folks, thank you again. And speakers,